Greetings and welcome to Conversations at the Intersection. I am Reverend Kelly X. I'm the Director of Racial Justice Ministries at Scarritt Bennett Center, and I am honored to have you join us for another episode of Conversations at the Intersection, a podcast where we look at the intersections of justice, whether it is around gender, whether it's race, whether it's celebration, or as we have an opportunity today to look at the intersections of justice and theater. I am so honored to have joining me on today Dr. Patricia Dockery, who is a playwright and the author of Septima, as well as to have Sharon Graci, who is the creative director for Pure Theater. I also have the greatest honor to have the executive director of Scarritt Bennett Center join me for today's conversation. That is Reverend Sondrea Tolbert. Thank you so much for you all coming and joining me on today. Even as my voice sounds a little heavy, I am excited about this conversation and excited about this our time together. Dr. Doctory, can you start off by letting us know what do you do and why?
Well, my day job is I am in higher ed. I am Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs at Morgan State University and HBCU, the National Treasure. I'm also a professor of sociology and anthropology. And I have been a closet artist for many years. And through this opportunity with Pure, I was able to just step on out the closet
Oh,
finally.
wow. Mhm. Awesome, awesome. And Sharon, can you share what you do and
Sure, of
why? Who for you?
course. Yeah. And I'm one of the founders of a professional theater company based in Charleston, South Carolina called Pure Theater. I am also its artistic director and executive director. So I run the daily operations of both the business aspect of the theater company as well as all the artistic endeavors of Pure. I'm also a professional stage director. And I'm the director of Septima. So my day to day is a combination of art and business, which is, it's all right. I like it. Yeah, it's good stuff.
So you are director four times over. Did I just hear this? You're
I
executive
Yes.
only take jobs
director
where I can have the word director in my
in
title.
the name. That's pretty awesome. And also Dr. Dockery was interesting is last week we had an opportunity to actually interview a alum of Morgan State
Oh,
who is the artistic director for a choir that will be performing at Scarritt in a couple of weeks. Actually, the week before
oh,
you
oh.
all come, he's the artistic director for the W. Crim Singers. So I guess we're out here loving
Good.
Morgan State right now.
All right.
Very,
Exactly.
very,
Wonderful.
very awesome. And so we brought you all here to talk about Septima and Septima Clark and how she meets us in theater. And so can can it doesn't matter which one, but can you really share about who Septima Clark was and why it was important to put her story on the stage?
Well, do you want me to start, Sharon?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, for those who will be watching, I do have this T-shirt on that says, "What would Septima do?" And I think that's a great way to introduce
Mhm.
who Septima Clark was and why she's important, why she should be important to more people, and definitely why she's important to me. Septima Clark was a strong, determined Black woman from Charleston, South Carolina, whose father had been enslaved. There's questionable, questions about whether or not her mother had really been a free woman, had been born free or not. But she grew
Mm.
up shortly after slavery had been abolished, only about 30 years, 25, 30 years after slavery had been abolished in the country. But from her humble roots, she went on to get a an amazing education and then share what she learned with others. She saw the connections between literacy and liberation, and as well as why it was important for the descendants of formerly enslaved people to be engaged citizens. She is known by many people as the mother of the movement. That is what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Called her. And it was her framework, the framework that she developed with others on John's Island, to the voter registration framework that
Mm.
SCLC adopted. That was, her brainchild, the work of her and other activists from Johns Island and elsewhere. And so we really are indebted to Septima because of her fearless work, which led to upwards of 800,000 Southern Blacks being registered to vote by the time the voter registration, the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1964. So she is in some ways an unsung heroine, and just very important to me. And having worked in Charleston, South Carolina, and having been a colleague of Sharon Graci, when this opportunity came to me through Sharon, it was a dream come true for me. So I'll
Mm.
let Sharon say
Mhm.
more.
I think one of the things that I love that you said, Patricia, that I think is so incredibly important about Septima, and I think it's so salient about our world today and our democracy today, is that she believed so much that problems that we have in society can be directly tied to the vote. And she encouraged
Mhm.
everyone to pursue their right to life, liberty, and happiness, and that voting was a means to improving their status quo and making real changes. And I think one of the things that I'm always so moved by with Septima is her willingness to work in the micro and at the micro level, saying
Mhm.
that I will move one heart and one mind at a time. That kind of small impact pays
Mm.
enormous dividends, or certainly has the potential to pay enormous dividends. And
Mhm.
those are some of the things, on top of everything else that Patricia has said, but those are the things that I think really stick with me about Septima Clark.
I agree. I
That's
agree.
good.
First of all, I want to know, you raised a shirt a few minutes ago, Dr. Dockery, and it said something that you said, what would Septima do? We want to ask, what first and foremost, how can we get that T-shirt?
Mhm. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
will that
Exactly.
T-shirt be available when you all come for the
Yes,
play showing in March, excuse me, March 6th and 7th? Will that be available to us? So
Yes.
that we
absolutely.
can also sport what would Septima do, and that kind of is the how I want to frame, I guess, my question to you, both of you, actually, that as we sit in this seat now, post a election in November of 2024, and knowing and thinking about this connection that you said between literacy and liberation,
Mm.
what would you suggest would be the stance, if you will, of Septima
Yeah.
if she was alive today,
Mm.
during, really educating, really knowing about what we're voting upon, because we've often, even seen now with some comments from people saying, wait a minute, I didn't vote for this. And so, as your t-shirt
Yeah.
states, that hopefully, we got those sizes of all of us, to make sure that
Yeah.
when you come, we
Yes.
can have that.
Mhm.
on March 6th and 7th. But what would you say? What would you think that how would be her
Yeah.
stance now with this connection that we're really needing to see between literacy and liberation?
Yeah, yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot over the last, month, or not even a month, 3 weeks, right? And even before that, during the transition of power, just thinking about what Septima would be thinking and doing. And because she was such a brilliant person and a person who read a lot and a person who got down into the weeds, I really believe that Septima would admonish us to not get distracted by all of the sort of the headlines and a lot of the unbelievable, unthinkable things that we're seeing coming out of the Capitol, and focusing on, where our agency really lies. I will
Mm.
say it's a different time than when Septima was, in the trenches. Um,
Mhm.
you know, the idea that we could be watching what many pretend surmise is a coup, a political coup, was unthinkable then. But we're seeing what many Eastern and African and Asian countries have seen happening right before our eyes. So perhaps the techniques that she used, the strategies, they may not be wholly applicable to today, but I certainly think she would admonish us to be knowledgeable about what really is happening, what really is important. And that means reading. That means reading
Mhm.
the right type of news, getting news from the right types of outlets, cross-checking, looking at different sources to make sure that we're not, reading fake news, if you will.
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
right, and then also um, aligning ourselves with like-minded people to devise our strategy. And I have to tell you, that's why I did the t-shirts, because I am continuously asking myself, when I'm feeling hopeless, what would Septima
Mm.
do? And
Mhm.
as a woman of faith, and as an organizer, she would not give up. So that means, with all of the resources and privilege that I have got to do something. So that is that, and the connection between literacy and freedom, again, just, you know, reading and being able to articulate your own story. Because if you're not, literate, then other people can continuously frame a narrative around who we are as Black people, as women, as immigrants, as members of the LGBTQ community, as people with disabilities. So that's where I see the connection between literacy and liberation, and what Septima would admonish us to be doing.
That's good.
That's good.
Mhm.
So,
Sharon,
through.
you I didn't know if Sharon had something to say with that.
What I really loved what you said, Patricia, was about that Septima would tell us to make good choices, basically, on how we spend our energy, and that we're kind of using our powers for good. And I think that that is really true about Septima. And Patricia, you said something that I think is also who we surround ourselves with, the kind of community that we build around these movements, and not just to make progress, but to bolster our sense of our fortitude for the long haul and for
Mm.
the fight ahead.
Yeah,
So I,
absolutely.
I just agree. Completely
And
agree.
Sharon, I would also say, when you just, there was something that you just said that made me think about, community and the people we
Mhm.
surround ourselves with. Septima was, she was an outlier, right? She was making
Mhm.
friends with white people, with, single women, uh, you know, people who weren't from Charleston, comeyas, if you will. She was determined that, you know, outside people were not going to tell her who she could be friends with,
Mm.
how to think about the world, how to think about other people. And I believe that it was her ability to connect with other people, and bring her authentic self, that made her so successful. Because if she had gone to, let's say, Highlander and had been skittish, about being in closed proximity, close quarters with white folks and talking about their issues and seeing alignment and congruence between their struggles and black struggles of the time, she never would have forged the relationship that she had with Miles Horton. And so it takes a
Mm.
special type of person to be a border crosser. And she was a border crosser. And as a result of that, she had a wide pantheon of co-conspirators in the
Good.
movement, which is what we need.
Yeah, that's good. I had a
Mhm.
question that I was about to ask, but I'm not going to ask that question yet. I got a different question that I want to ask. When you start talking about community, and what it makes me think about, Sharon, is how Pure Theater does this thing called senior to senior. And
Yes.
so, where it creates opportunities for seniors in high schools to interact with theater with senior citizens, our senior saints, and creates a time for them to both view it, but then to be in conversation with one another. And as I hear both of you talking, what it does, it really speaks to the work that Septima was doing and getting people engaged within their community and building beloved community while having also an educated um, voter base. That the voters need to be educated, and we do that in community. Sharon, can you talk about the importance of that program and how it is being utilized in the sharing of this play in particular?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that so seniors and seniors is and it actually started the same season that we produced Septima. So I guess we're in our second year of really running the seniors and seniors program, and it was just kind of this idea that we could enter into and all benefit from an intergenerational dialogue, and just saying, how do we make those connections in a way that breaks down preconceived notions about people. It
Mm.
breaks down walls about um, relationships and how we may or may not relate to one another. And it encourages us to challenge these kind of preconceived notions we have, not just about who someone else is, but how they think, and making decisions on how they think based on gross generalizations. So that's
Mm.
really how seniors and seniors came about. And one of the things that I think is really, I have 5 children,
Oh wow.
and I know 5. Gosh. I do have a whole bunch of kids. And so I just recently became an empty nester. My husband Rodney and I, after 34 years of actively raising children in our house. So now everyone is out of the house, and our youngest
Mm.
is a freshman. But
And
one
she
of the
got a
things,
puppy, but I'm sorry. Go
oh
ahead.
my gosh, I got a puppy, which is
I
just
am
like having like three
considering.
kids.
I
I
only
just
have
had three
Sorry.
two.
toddlers, three
I only
badly
have
behaved
two.
toddlers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the seniors and seniors kind of came out of also encouraging
Mm.
younger generations to see adults in a way that is not just wholly punitive, that you can actually have relationships with your elders in a way that you are just not going to be in trouble every time you open your mouth and speak. And on the flip side of that is for our senior saints to say, these kids, these 17-year-olds, these 16-year-olds, these 18-year-olds, they are not just only on TikTok. They are forming opinions. They have ideas. And it's just a way to really help people open up around issues that affect all of us. And
Mhm.
certainly what Septima represents, and the work that we continue today in voter rights and education, everyone hopefully can get behind the importance of that, how foundational that is to our democracy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
I'm still on that education piece as well, because I think it's such a exciting time to be able to tap into those younger voices, and how they are relating to what's going on now, and how we can spark, how they can continue to be involved in helping change the world. When we see that the students, first of all, I want to go back a little bit because we talked about her. We talked about Septima being a part of educating, but did we talk about where she did it at? I want to take us back a little bit before we even go to that question, and talk about how she got to Highlander, and how she was so instrumental in, teaching the likes of Rosa Parks and Ella Baker, and how that involvement, even with NAACP and SELC, how that all came to be, if you will, and to show how. How she was, regarded. We keep saying she was hidden and unsung, but she's so unsung that people oftentimes do not make the connections of how important her work was towards the movement.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Septima's parents were adamant that she and her siblings get a good education, which was, really revolutionary thinking for
Yeah.
people, for poor Black folks in Charleston, right? Just after the turn of the century, for her mom to be wanting her kids to have a education on par with white kids, with white folks' kids. And so they spent the money that they had making sure that she got a good education. Sometimes she was in public school, but other times she was in private school, and she got a classical education at the Avery Institute there in Charleston at
Mhm.
125 Bull Street, and which was founded by free men of color, with funds from the Freedmen's Bureau. So, her training was provided was given in a place that that was built on a foundation of giving back and preparing Black folks to live as fully engaged citizens, right? And so um that was who she got that training, and she paid it forward after she finished school. And she couldn't get a teaching job in Charleston, the city of Charleston. She had to go to Johns Island, which is now really a beautiful, I mean, I'm sure it was
Mhm.
beautiful and opulent then, but now it's a popular place to live.
Mhm. Mhm.
New development, you probably can't even buy a house on Johns Island
On
under a
John's,
million
no, you
dollars
can't.
right, right, exactly. And so, but back then, there were poor white folks, poor Black folks,
Yeah.
and of course plantation owners. And she had to take a what was the little boat called that she took over
He
to
took the
Johns Island?
gasoline launch from
The
Trad
gas,
Street. Yeah.
right. Doesn't that sound dangerous? A
But
gasoline
it took all
launch.
day. It wasn't like I'm going to be there in 45 minutes. It was I'm going to be there in 8 hours. And it was just
Right,
basically
right.
going down the waterways in Charleston from downtown Charleston to the boat launch on John's. It was an all
I'm
day
sure it was
affair.
beautiful, full of
I'm sure it
mosquitoes. It
was.
was beautiful, beautiful, but full of mosquitoes, nevertheless, right?
Mhm.
And so she goes there, and she's not from Johns Island. She doesn't know all of the native customs. These are Black people, of course, but these are not Black people that she was reared with. And so they're a very cloistered community. And she was welcomed into their community after it was clear that she was there to help them, that she was authentic, that she, didn't see them as less than them, that
Yes.
she didn't see them as backwards. And she saw the humanity in each of their children and the parents, and um, they loved her. And so she spent some time there teaching before teaching in Columbia, South Carolina. And throughout all of this, she's still going to school to, finish her bachelor's degree. So this is a woman who was not just teaching; she's um, always doing self-development. She's a lifelong learner. Um, Once she is able to teach in Charleston, South Carolina, and she's very active in the NAACP. Of course, there's white backlash. Against affinity organizations like the NAACP that were trying to um, do diversity, equity, and inclusion work back in the day, even though
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the handle. And she lost her job because she stood on the side of righteousness.
Yeah.
Teachers were told that if they had memberships with the NAACP, that they would lose their teaching jobs. And here she is, this pint-sized woman who stands with the NAACP and loses her job. So I think what we can learn from Septima with just that bit of the story is that she understood the cost for liberation, right?
Mm.
She
Mm.
understood what it would take, and she was willing to do that. Sharon, do you want to talk about the citizenship schools and um,
Yeah, um, absolutely. I think one of the things that Patricia, you mentioned that, well, she had gone to Columbia and she was pursuing her and got her degree from Benedict College. Um, and the entire time that she was in Columbia, I would say, and Patricia, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but that is when she really began to be interested in adult
yes,
education.
yes.
And that is where she really started saying, to your point, Patricia, if you cannot read, if you are not literate, then the stories you are victim to the stories that will be told about you, written about you.
Mm.
And
Right.
you're kind of powerless to do much about it. So she began teaching at night. She would teach during the day, and then she began teaching in the adult education program at night. And her students ranged from, I think, 16, 17 years old to their 70s. And the average reading age was a fourth grade level. So she was really teaching them how to sign their own names, how to read contracts. And it was always on information that they wanted to read. So it could be the Bible, it could be letters from their children, anything
Mm.
that inspired them to read. And as she kind of moved down that path, she met Miles Horton at the Highlander, and they really started this idea. She pitched this idea of citizenship schools just based, and I think that's pretty accurate. Patricia, would you
Yeah.
agree? Based on her
Yes.
work in Columbia with adult
Mm-hmm.
learners.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And she
Absolutely.
thought, if I can do it here, we can do it elsewhere. And the first citizenship with school was on Johns Island with Esau Jenkins, who had purchased
A bus.
a
Oh,
bus.
first the storefront, like,
The
right? The
storefront,
store.
that's right. He had the store in the front, a co-op in the front, and they were learning to read in the back so that they weren't shut
Mm.
down. Mhm.
I think it's what when you were talking just then, when you were speaking just then, Sharon, I was thinking about how the student demographics in higher ed have shifted so that now the what we when we were going to college, non-traditional students were adult learners. Today we
Mm.
know
Right.
that traditional students now by and large are adult learners. And
Mhm.
so that makes Septima's story even that more important to me right now because we are seeing so many quote unquote, 24, 25-year olds, 28-year olds who are in school and older. And these were the people, and again, older, much older, who Septima was working with. And so I think that if we think about her methodology, it's really ripe for who we're seeing on college campuses today.
Yeah.
So it's a great correlation there.
Hmm.
And what you've got me thinking about is this quote that you all have been using in the tour that she has, where she says, "We need to be taught to study rather than believe, to inquire rather than to affirm." And I think that's interesting in that we have a more literate electorate now. Like people can read better, like have the ability to read. Yet, what we also have that we're dealing with today is AI generated news
Yeah,
stories and having to learn how to study in the sense of, is this the truth? What is the source? Where is this source coming from?
right.
And there's a need for uh, that level of education still, even for those who may be college educated but may
Absolutely.
not understand what it means to be able to negotiate the digital world now and the landscape that we have. And so,
Absolutely.
because one of the things that we see a lot are people talking about who they voted for and then not understanding the policies that were going to be enacted,
Mhm.
because
Hmm.
what was shared from the campaign trail compared to what was being shared in different spaces, and those being two different forms of education, like information. And I think
Mhm.
oftentimes those who are in more progressive spaces, we can speak with a whole lot of words and use all the syllables and say this is the thing that's about to happen, right?
Hmm.
um but the liter for lack of the better word, the literacy there to be able to cut through all of the
Yeah.
GRE words is difficult. And I think
Mhm.
the other time, sometimes even speaking very simply may not give you enough detail. And so
Mm.
I wonder what do you think a citizenship school might look like today?
That's a good question.
Um,
Ooh,
to
guys.
be
Yeah, that's a
able
great question.
to
Mm-hmm.
really help people be informed about their vote.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I will tell you what I'm doing for myself that I think it could lend itself. I have always been a big reader. This is just what I had like in a little crate over here. Sondrea and I, we have so many books. Sharon, I mean, just books, books, books. I was always a big reader.
I love to
And with
read.
Yeah, yeah, but with working, um, commuting, and then you want to have some downtime to
Hmm.
watch something to take you away, and then you have some, you do some scrolling and da 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 da. So I have gotten back to making sure that I am reading something of that I'm always reading something, a book. Like that is key. And I think that a citizenship school would focus on strengthening the literacy of the populace,
Mm.
and then also getting them to read and maybe decipher, think critically about news articles, the differences, maybe looking at comparisons of the way one story is presented in multiple different media platforms, to get
Mm.
folks to think critically. Uh,
Hmm.
because that critical assessment is going to be needed. It's the same thing that happened in um, Frederick Douglass's the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, right? When he reads the Columbian Orator, right? And so
Hmm.
and he hears what the enslaved man, how he argues the merits of his freedom, and
Right.
he's like, aha, oh my God, it's like the shackles fell from like his his eyes, right? And
Mhm.
he was able to draw parallels between his circumstances as, a person who was living in chattel and bondage since the time
Mhm.
of birth, and that literacy made him the great orator. I would say the greatest orator of the 19th century. Some might say it was Abe Lincoln, but I'm gonna go with Douglas.
Okay. Mhm.
I mean, because Douglas was using, he was using classical rhetoric in his writing, and
Mhm.
pisma,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
just all amazing. And so I
Yeah.
think that he knew that in order to touch the consciousness, I was going to say the hearts of what white northern white Christians, I'm going to just say the consciousness, he needed
Mhm.
to speak the language, and not necessarily their language. He needed to speak, the elite language, and you know translate the bondage story to one that was a that they could access,
Right.
that they could, I wouldn't say understand, but one that they would feel compassion for or empathy for.
Mhm.
So I would say focusing on reading, and then from there on, we need to get back to the Constitution.
Yeah.
Get back to the Constitution. Yes.
Yeah.
How about you, Sharon?
I think that that's spot on. It's so astounding to me how susceptible human beings continue to be. It's like we really, we've always loved a snake oil salesman.
You too.
Why?
Mm,
It's like, dude,
mm.
Mhm.
and what I think is so interesting to me is it's like we'll make comments and stand in judgment of the susceptibility and the naivete of anybody who's a huckster in 1856, and they've got
Mhm.
their potions out of the back of the wagon, and we think we'll never fall for that. It's just a different potion,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm.
still as equally susceptible to the tale. And I
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
think I think that
Mhm.
y- to me, it's really unpacking identity and trying to find the identity of this nation. And when we look at what happens with our politicians, it's rhetoric that speaks to a particular identity that has power to move great numbers of individuals, even when it is 100% not in their best interest to do that, that
Mm-hmm.
they would rather belong to that particular group than to not have that I or to have their identity challenged. And I think it's, unfortunately we're a two-party system, and I think it goes on both through both
Mm-hmm.
parties, that you want to be identified with a more progressive platform or a more conservative platform, and then they just keep filling those platforms
Mhm.
with ideas that appeal to your identity, when
Yeah.
really what we really need is a cohesive identity for our nation that embraces really what it means to be fearless Americans,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
because we
Mm.
are.
And what I
We
hear
are.
you saying, and as I think back to that idea of being taught how to study, one of the things that can be difficult in an educational process is going to school with one idea and finding out that what you've been taught is not actually the truth. Like, I know as someone with the Masters of Divinity and going to divinity school, going to seminary, they're always like, don't go to seminary because you're gonna lose your faith. Um, but really, what it is the fear is that you have to come in contact with a differing understanding of the same thing, and
Mm-hmm.
how then do you deal with that? And being willing to let go of an idea, of a concept that has been given to
That.
us. Because I think sometimes we're not, we would rather hold on to a lie
Mhm.
than
Yeah.
Mhm.
fully
Yeah.
embrace the truth.
The truth.
And so the idea that that America could be the greatest country that ever existed, and that it was built on the backs of enslaved people, like that's a difficult thing. But I will say that
Hmm.
democracy, the capacity to allow people to choose their own destiny and to vote, is an amazing concept. That
Absolutely.
that and it is that constitution, as Dockery was saying, and being able to go back to that is what allowed enslaved people to say, no, you said all men are created equal. I understand myself to be a man, and actually you do too, regardless of if you want to admit it or not. And
Hmm.
thus, we deserve to also be free. And so,
Hmm.
how do we then become a more perfect union? But we've
Yeah.
got to be
Mhm.
willing to balance these two things, and have
Mhm.
and I think the fear is that by letting go of the lie, we don't know what will be replaced with.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And that
Right.
thing can be
Yeah.
very scary for folks.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love
Absolutely.
what you said. I love what you said, coming into contact with, can you repeat that? Coming into contact with differing
Beliefs that,
views.
This.
views
Mhm.
on whatever that situation is. And so
Mhm.
if we're going to talk about voting, we know that originally the only people who can vote were white men who owned
Own
land,
lands. Yeah.
right? And so to and so in that moment, that's what they thought was the best. If you got enough money and you can buy land, then that means that you have what it takes to be able to really vote. But to then expand that to say, well, actually, no, maybe all men, all white men get to vote.
Hmm.
Right.
That's an expansion of an idea that is
Hmm.
contradictory to the first. And even though, as a black woman, I will say, wait a minute, we're missing a whole bunch of folks there.
Mhm.
But the ability to let that grow means that we've
Hmm.
allowed ourselves to be in conversation with other spaces. And so, and and that's part of the push. And I understand the push of conservatism is, well, how far is too far?
Mhm.
But I also know that what we underestimate is the capacity of humanity.
Right.
I
Hmm.
agree with that
And
completely.
so being
Yes.
Mhm.
able to open our hearts up to
So
say, you
true.
might not look like me, but I can see your humanity and
Mhm.
the
Absolutely.
God piece that's in you. And so you might come from it. Because as was said earlier, Septima's going to a place where different type of black people.
Yeah.
Hmm. Right.
You know,
Right.
Right.
because
Mhm.
there's a diversity in that. And
Right.
Right.
they had to figure out, wait a minute, who are you? And she said, I'm coming. And then we come in,
Right.
oh, well, actually, okay. So I didn't know that black folks did this. Oh,
Hmm.
Mhm.
as that. And so now my
Yeah.
capacity grows and my understanding of humanity grows and my love grows. And then our community gets to be
Absolutely.
fuller, more
Yes.
beautiful because we allow
Yes.
for a broader stance.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think that capacity, she's experienced all of that, and
Hmm.
I think that's the beauty of Septima, is that she's been able to experience all of those challenges. Because not only do you have the, you're that type of black, but you also have the sexism piece, that, who are you
Hmm.
Mhm.
coming in here teaching us and knowing
Right.
this, and who do you
Hmm.
think you are, kind of piece. And
Right.
so even getting that type of pushback, even from those within the movement, right?
Right. Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
To get that pushback from those leaders in the movement, and having to, have Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King continue to go to bat for her when she's coming up against those who, like, girl, who are you? Sit down somewhere.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
that type of coming up against sexism in that way, and that it could not be but by, I think, Dr. Dockery talked about, being a person of faith, but it could not but be by her faith, in that intersection, if you will, with faith and justice, and how
Hmm.
that plays out. And that we see a lot of that. We see a lot of, if it was not for the hope that you have, that
Right.
even in the face of all of this adversity, believing in something greater than who you are and in the circumstances in which you are facing, to be able to reach and help others come to have a
Hmm.
hope in the midst of a hopeless situation. And
Yeah.
so as we are facing this day and time, what would you say that this play does, if you will, for a new generation of folks that
Mhm.
not doesn't know Septima, doesn't know necessarily about citizenship schools.
Mhm.
Um, how does this play, if you will, introduce them not only to the woman of Septima, but also to the concepts and the construct in
Mm.
which she put forth that may lead us in a path forward now.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
How what would you say? I mean, because she, again, United Women in Faith. She was a United Methodist. She was a United Methodist
Mhm.
woman.
Mhm. Mhm.
Deep faith. Also, involved. She was a product of HBCU. I mean,
Mhm.
she's a
Mhm.
product
Mhm.
of a sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha
Mhm.
sorority. So you
Mhm.
have
Mhm.
all of these quote unquote constructs that she brought to the table, and yet
Mhm.
faced opposition in the midst of
Mhm.
all of that, but
Yeah,
yet
yeah,
still was able to be one that not only was a silent overcomer, not only
yeah,
individually, but also for the community. And
yeah,
so, what do you say that this play, or how does this play, if you will, help or introduce us to those types of concepts? Because
yeah.
I'm just so glad that we have this opportunity to talk with you all today, and that we have the opportunity to bring Septima to Scarritt March 6th and March
Mhm.
7th. And
Mhm.
also, even further, the conversation that we have a chance to sit down face to face with you guys
Oh
and have
yeah.
even further conversation, during that March 6th and 7th time frame. But if you will, how
Yeah.
does this play situate us in that way?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I believe that Septima's story and this play is evidence that everything is possible. Nothing is
Mm.
impossible with God.
Yeah.
Nothing is impossible if it's for righteousness. Um,
Mhm.
and that, dreaming of a time and a place that where equity and diversity and people of all hues and religions and gender expressions and yada and from different parts of the are able to live freely and be accepted as American citizens. Septima demonstrates that whatever you have to do in love and whatever you do in love, and what if you dream big about it, dream the impossible, and you
Yeah.
put the work into it, that it is possible. Now, of course, for Septima and for King and for those in the civil rights movement at that time, suffrage, getting Black folks the right to vote, and for all American citizens the right to vote, for that matter, was the goal, right? And then, of course, of the other protections came into place with the Civil Rights Act. I think that you know the thought about this moment and what we'll need to really undo some of just the dastardly work of the last 3 weeks, plus the
Mm.
work that was in place before that. And I'm not just talking about Trump, I'm talking about stuff that we kind of turned a blind eye to, that led up to the populace being receptive to these really radically bad ideas that we now see coming into fruition. It may take something radical, like calling for congressional conference, calling,
Mm.
creating, voting on new amendments, the I hate to say the founding fathers, but the architects of the of the
Of the
Of the
Constitution.
Constitution, of the
Mhm.
Constitution.
Constitution,
Yeah.
they put them right. They put in you know, the you know, this tool of amendments so that we can change, you know, the laws, or, you know, if need by, if things start going sideways. And
Yeah.
by golly, you know, we're going sideways, backwards right now. So I don't know, if something like that radical may spring up from
Mm.
the populace, or something else. I don't know. It could, maybe it's just protest again, but for some reason I don't know if protest is going is if it has the same. What do they say? I don't know if it hits the same. Is that what they say, Sonny? I don't know if it hits
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. You know, we had a school show. We had several school shows last week, and one of the conversations we were having before the show was about Shelby County versus Holder, which was a 2013 decision at the Supreme Court
Mm.
that struck down the, I guess, 4B in the Voting Rights Act.
Nice.
And
Okay.
we know that as soon as that went through, which 23 states moved to suppress votes.
And let me
23
be.
states moved against it.
That's the that's the one that said that certain states no longer needed extra supervision to make sure that
That's exactly
everyone
right.
could vote. Okay. All right. I just wanted to
That's exactly
clarify.
right. And they did it based on the fact that the information that was more than 40 years old. So I think they said it was unconstitutional. Two sections, Section 4 and Section 5, I believe, and they found Section 4 to be unconstitutional because the information was too old and it no longer pertained.
And
Section
then they
5
turned
they
around
let
and did the same
stand.
thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Section 5 stood, but without, and Section 5 basically said that the federal government can uh, ensure that your voting practices are fair. Well,
Mm.
without 4 in place, then 4 was basically, it just didn't, it had no substance to it.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
So then 23 states immediately moved and made it much more difficult, especially with the voter identification, to vote.
Hmm.
So when we talk about how salient it is, it's completely and totally important, as important today that we are active and engaged citizens, that we know the truth of that, and that we stand up for faith in our democracy, that we believe that a vote is so foundational
Mm.
to who we are, and free and fair elections are something that we should demand. We need to look at things like one person, one vote, the Electoral College,
Yes.
um, political gerrymandering.
Yeah.
These are
Oh my God.
all assaults on our democracy.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And as citizens, I think that's where Septima would be today. She would say, hey, look, why does this stand? Why is our civic education so poor? We so misunderstand what
Hmm.
Patricia was talking about. A constitutional convention. How do you have an amendment to the Constitution pass?
Mhm.
What do
Mhm.
we need to do? All of those things I think are kind of the next wave for activism, is
Yeah.
talking about
Mm.
it
Yes.
is we should not be hopeless. We can change it. We just
Mhm.
have to
Mm.
be brave
Yeah.
and
That's
Absolutely.
yeah.
informed.
Good. But you mentioned the schools. How's the schools' reaction been? The students'
Oh,
reaction been to the play?
they love it, don't they, Patricia? They
They
love
do.
it. They love
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
We get such incredible feedback, and I think what's fascinating is you really expect them to be about the most unreceptive audience,
Right.
but they
Exactly.
love it. Yeah, they do. You're
Yes.
like, hey, they have to get off their
Yeah.
phones. They're not going to like this, but they do. They love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I think, and I
Awesome.
really think, I think it's because that, well, you know, they don't know who she is, but I think when they see the connection between Septima and they're introduced to Miles Horton, and then they know Rosa Parks, and they see the camaraderie and the friendship and the love, and then the story unravels. I think that, and then the music, I think that those are the hooks, right? That music.
I think you're right.
The music is great,
Mhm.
right. The music is great.
Yeah.
I guess I'm sitting over here being biased, and that's why I was so excited to bring it to Scarritt and to have this opportunity to bring it to Scarritt March 6th and 7th, and with special performances with students, as well as open
Mhm.
performances for the public in the evening. That
Yeah.
we're
Mhm.
just excited about you all coming, as well as having the talkbacks in the afternoon. I want to ask one last question. I don't know, do we have time for it, Kelly, Reverend Kelly X? Or we could sit here and talk all afternoon, but I know they
Mhm.
have other lives, and we hold them hostage March 6th and 7th. So we feel like we can let them go today because we'll hold them hostage March 6th and 7th.
It's
But I think
perfect.
we can get.
We can't
I think
wait.
we can get this one last question
Wait, come
in.
on. Yeah, come on.
There's one last question. That when you're coming up on really the legacy of Septima Clark, will be what 125 in May. How old is it? About the
Oh
legacy
no.
of
Oh,
it's
127, I
one
think.
120.
127, 120,
Yeah, 127. Because what in
Yeah.
127,
2023,
127.
123. Wait, when 23, she would have
Yeah,
been
that's right.
125. Yeah,
Yeah.
127.
Yeah,
127.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
127.
Yeah.
So what is something that you wish to leave with us? This is a monumental moment in time, if you will, and so as we end to whet the audience's appetite to go and make sure that their face is in the place
Yes.
for getting just to witness and to be a part of this movement of liberation, of education and liberation. What would you parting words that you would
Yeah.
say to say that they must be in the place?
Yes.
Yeah. Certainly, you do not want to miss this story of this amazing woman. And even before you see the performance, if you just want to do a little Google search, and in between, you know, reading the newspaper, watching the news, doom scrolling, all of that. I think that if you ask yourself, what would Septima do? Let me see, what would Septima do? Um,
Mhm.
when when the craziness of Washington has trickled down to your local areas and you are just, feeling a lot of despair, I
Yeah.
would ask yourself that question and think about how a woman who was one generation post slavery, who came from poverty, who, for whom it took many years to finish her college degree, who gave back to the community, who taught her students' parents, who
Oh, that's
poured
good.
into them so that they could understand their rights as American citizens. If she could do it, if she could give Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and all those young and old people who were out there in the trenches risking their lives to
Mhm.
register Black folks, Southern Black folks to vote, then surely with all that we have, we can do something. And so it is incumbent upon us to figure out what that something is, so that, tomorrow looks the way we want it to look and not the way some folks in DC, and in our communities are trying to steer tomorrow to look like. That's my 2 cents.
Good. That's
Thank you.
good.
Right.
Sharon, what are
Anybody?
your 2 cents?
Um, all of that, I 100% agree. I think the other thing about it is if we look at just like an act of theater, like what we're in the middle of, this is a tour that is funded by the National Endowment of the Arts. Um, it is funded by the South Carolina Arts Commission. I mean, it is really
Mm.
the power of a public and private kind of partnership to tell a story about an extraordinary human being through a medium that has survived for millennia for a reason. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
tell you that there's something really powerful about theater, and it's a little bit, most people do not know this, but when an audience sits together in a theater, a tiny miracle happens to that audience. Their heartbeats synchronize.
Yeah.
So when you think about what is happening just to human beings in proximity and association, sharing a story that's being presented and told live, that it is
Mm.
so powerful of an experience for people that you are actually going to synchronize your heartbeat
Wow.
with 100, 200 strangers who are sitting in the room with you
Wow.
experiencing the same story. And I think that's such a testimony to this art form. It's a testimony to Patricia's play. Hopefully, it's a testimony to pure theater and the actors who are on the
Oh,
stage
pure.
and all of it together. So
Mm.
that's, I think it's just important to come and be a part of it.
Mm.
Yeah.
That sounds like healing work. It's good.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It does.
Hmm.
And I just
Hmm.
love the name of the theater, Pure. The
Thank
Pure
Yes.
Theater,
you.
and
And
that the
and
Pure
and
Theater
and
is
wait,
saying,
wait. Guess what? Donors and fans of Pure are called
what do they
Puritans.
call Puritans? Oh
Oh,
my goodness!
We're reclaiming the word.
that's
Oh my
good. That's
I
goodness!
love
good.
it. I
Oh
That's
my
love it.
goodness! Oh my goodness!
Yes, I
They're
love
called
it.
Puritans, yeah.
That's interesting. But no, thank you all so much for this, for sitting down with us. This has been enriching. It has gotten us, even if we could be any more excited about this opportunity to bring Septima here to Nashville. Um, we are just elated for this
Yes.
opportunity
Yes.
for Pure Theater to stop by Nashville, Tennessee,
Yes.
on its worldwide tour.
Oh, oh, say
Septima,
it
yep.
now. Say it now.
Hmm.
On his worldwide tour to come to Nashville, Tennessee. You know, that's actually, this is the place that I met Dr. Patricia
Yes.
Williams at Fisk
Yes.
University. So
Yes.
we'll do, she's coming back home for a stint. And so we are excited about it and to
Yes.
have this moment. And so, we just hope that the Nashville community and surrounding areas, I've heard of groups that are getting together to come. We have several schools that we're in touch with for the school performances and the seniors. But the
Hmm.
evening performances on March the 6th and 7th are for public performances at 7 o'clock here on the historic campus of Scarritt Bennett. And we are just elated, and so we hope that the community, surrounding communities, will just be as excited as we are.
Yes.
As we mentioned earlier, Dr. Dockery, we talked earlier with Patrick Daly, that's his name.
Yes. That's
Patrick
his name.
Daly, who's a counter alto, the founding artistic director of William Crim Singers, a graduate of Morgan State. They'll be
Okay.
in concert here for Black Sacred Weekend, February the
Oh, wow.
28th and March the 1st. And
Wow.
so, yeah, this whole Morgan State thing, I don't know what's going
Yeah.
on with it. But
I have to tell my
but
Uber boss.
again, yeah, it's a part of our offerings for Black History Month, and this eases us into Women's Month, talking about women's empowerment. Most
Yes.
certainly,
Hmm.
one of the prongs of Scarritt. Scarritt has four tenets: one being women's empowerment, the other being racial justice ministries, the other being spiritual formation, and the other one being transformative education. So Septima fits in all of those prongs. And so
Yay.
that's why
Yeah.
we are just so excited about having it, and so excited about having Black Hymnody, Black Sacred Weekend, February 28th. So we will see you March 6th and March
Yes.
7th here in
Yes.
Nashville,
Yes.
Tennessee. Sharon and
Looking
Yes.
Patricia
forward
and
to
the
it.
rest of the cast.
Yeah.
Cast members, how many is it? Seven?
Six.
Six
Mm-hmm.
cast members. So we are so excited about them coming. And thank
Yay.
you all so much for this time, Reverend Kelly X. I will turn it back over to you to give closing remarks. But again, we are so. Again, you mentioned doing the work in love, and that I read that scripture to everyone this morning. That First Corinthians 16 and 19. That let everything you do be done in love. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're excited. This will be another part of the work that is done in love.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
And so I just want to thank everyone for joining me for another episode of Conversations at the Intersection, and how we had an opportunity to look at how justice and theater can intersect to cause us to create a more just world when we have a informed electorate. And we are just thankful for the life and the legacy of Septima Clark, and my hope is that we will inform others, that we will take a little bit more time to to read a little bit, that we might go and do some studying, and we won't
Mm-hmm.
allow the first bit of information to be the final bit of information that we receive, that we are really intentional in studying so that we might truly create beloved community. We want to thank
yeah.
you again for joining us, and I look
Oh,
forward to meeting with you all next time. Thank you so much.
yes.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
Don't forget
much.
to
Thank you.
get
Thank
those
you.
tickets,
Get those
scarrittbennett.org.
tickets.
That's right.